In this video, we will talk about the behavioral science approach. We're still working from the Educational Administration, Concepts and Practices by Lunenburg and Ornstein, published in 2011 by Cengage Learning. So the outline today is pretty long, and it includes the main concepts, the ideas put forward by the thinkers in the behavioral science approach, such as effectiveness, efficiency, fusion process, individual, organization, conflict, etc. And the list is even longer than you see here in this bullet list. So let's just dive in and discuss those things. So really, the behavioral science approach kind of is a group of of literature that is written by so many authors working in many directions that it's really hard to kind of even hard to call them a group. But I guess what kind of unifies them together is that they were looking at human behavior, and they were also kind of critical of the classical and human relations approaches. Okay, so the first big contributor to the behavioral science approach was Chester Bernard, and he put forward the idea of a conceptual cooperative system. Okay, so according to him, a cooperative system integrates human relations and classical management principles. Okay, so according to Bernard, to attain cooperation and financial success, two conditions must be met. This is effectiveness, which is the degree to which the common purpose of the organization is achieved, and the second is efficiency. It is the satisfaction of individual motives of employees. Okay, so and according to Bernard, an equilibrium between organizations' goals and individuals' goals, um, you know, that's when organizations can actually operate and survive, not to say thrive, right? So that means that managers must have both human and technical skills in order to lead. E. White Bake came up with the idea that any organization is an embodiment of a fusion process, right? In this fusion process is really an interaction between an individual and an organization, and it's based on the idea that each organization uses the individual in order to promote its own goals, whereas the individual uses the organization in order to further his or her goals, right? And this idea of fusion comes up when in this process in which both remake each other to some degree, right? So individuals personalize the organization, whereas the organization typically socializes the individuals. And that happens through what Bake called bonds of organization. These are formal, informal, here's a spelling error, organization, and workflow, and other things, right? So that's an interesting concept. Another concept put forward by Chris Argylis was of individual and organization conflict, right? So according to Argylis, there is an inherent conflict between the individual and the organization, right? And it happens because people's personalities, they mature, whereas the organizations remain oppressive by nature. Okay, so according to Argylis, individuals develop from immaturity and dependence to maturity and independence. And according to Argylis, basic principles of management that we discussed, in classical approach and in the human relations approach, they are inconsistent with the mature adult personality, right? So when there is this discrepancy and mismatch between the level of maturity of a person and how oppressive an organization is, then the result is conflict, frustration, and failure. Okay, so Argelis discussed several ways in which people cope, with this oppressiveness of organizations. So one way to cope is to ascend the hierarchy, right? To become, to kind of take up higher level positions in the organization, right? In order to match the maturing personality. Another is, various defense mechanisms, like just coping mechanisms. It could be apathy. It could be dysfunction, really, just in many levels in the organization. So the next idea was put forward by Jacob Quetzals and Egon Guba. They argued that social systems, they involve two related and dependent classes of phenomena. The first class is nomothetic. This is represented by institutions with roles and expectations, and idiographic, individuals with certain personalities and needs and dispositions. And according to Getzel and Guba, people's behavior is a function of an interaction between personal needs and institutional goals, right? So when there is conformity to the institution, its roles, and its expectations, the result is organizational effectiveness. Whereas when the conformity is towards individuals, their personalities, and their needs and dispositions, then individuals are efficient. Okay, so this is kind of similar to this kind of is related to this individual organization conflict, but it really makes it more complex and more nuanced. Okay. And of course, there is the Abraham Maslow's need hierarchy, right? Everyone knows the pyramid. If not, please Google. According to Maslow, an individual attempts to satisfy a hierarchy of needs, and here the administrator's job is really to provide opportunities for people to satisfy these needs that they currently have, while also pursuing organization's goals. Right? So Maslow, influenced many other thinkers. So, for example, Douglas McGregor, who developed the ideas in Maslow's work into concepts of theory X and theory Y. So basically, what that is a set of each theory X and Y. They are two contrasting sets of assumptions, about people, and they also offer corresponding management strategies, right? So according to theory X, the sets of assumptions and management strategies, they correspond to the classical approach, right? And theory Y corresponds to the human relations approach. So really, this is a different way to look at what these two approaches kind of propose based on the assumptions about human behavior. Okay, another line of thought influenced by Maslow was the idea of hygiene motivation, put forward by Frederick Herzberg, right? So according to Herzberg, motivation can be affected by two types of factors. The first type is hygiene factors, right? This kind of factors, they prevent people to be dissatisfied, right? So these factors are really those related to Maslow's lower level needs. Okay, and the second type of factors are motivation factors, and these ones, they cause job satisfaction. So they cause people to be satisfied about their work, and they correspond to the two higher level needs in Maslow's pyramid. These are esteem and self-actualization, right? And the main idea is that those hygiene factors, they cannot lead to satisfaction. It's just they can just prevent burnout and dissatisfaction. So a management style should be really different from classical and human relation approaches. So that's how Frederick Herzberg put it. Rensis Likert proposed systems 1 and 4. And he studied the effect of how management systems affect employees' attitudes and behaviors. So basically, these 4 systems are pretty much 4 different leadership styles or related organizational climates, right? So system 1 is exploitative authoritative. The name speaks for itself. System 2 benevolent authoritative. System 3 consultative, and system 4 participative group. Okay, so according to Likert, the system 4 participative group was closest to the ideal one. Okay. Robert Blake and Jane Mouton proposed the idea of managerial grid. Yeah, so that grid is built on 2 dimensions of managerial behavior, right? The first dimension is concern for production, concern for result, right? And the second dimension is concern for people. And the grid has 81 cells, and basically it can be used to identify one's management style. Paul Hersey and Kenneth Blanchard proposed the concept of situational leadership. So, according to them, there is it's really based on the relationship between follower maturity, leader task behavior, and leader relationship behavior, right? So, according to Hersey and Blanchard, the style of leadership will only be effective when it is appropriate for the maturity level of the followers, right? And in terms of maturity of the followers, they distinguish 2 types of maturity: job maturity, which is maturity to perform the job, and psychological maturity, level of motivation, achievement needs, willingness to accept responsibility. So basically, there's no perfect style of leadership. The one that is effective is the one appropriate for the maturity level of the followers. Bernard Bass proposed the idea of transformational leadership. Yeah, so he divided leadership types into 2. The first is transactional, right? That is when a leader determines what his or her subordinates need to do to achieve their own and the organization's goals, and then helps them become confident they can reach these goals, and rewards them, and basically gets what needs to be done, right? In contrast, transformational leaders, they motivate their subordinates to do more than they originally expected to do. They accomplish this in 3 ways, by raising followers' level of consciousness about the importance and value of the outcomes and ways of reaching them. 2, by getting them to transcend their own self-interest for the sake of the team, organization, or even larger community, right? And 3, by raising followers' need levels to the higher order ones, such as self-actualization, or just by expanding their needs, right? Adding more needs of various type. There are very many other contributions to the behavioral science approach, and really the main contribution of all of this body of literature is that to the organizational theory is that this understanding that there is no one best way to administer an organization. There are no motivation strategies, organizational structures, decision-making patterns, communication techniques, leadership styles that will fit all situations. Really, instead, as educational administrators, you have to find different ways that fit different situations. That's it about behavioral science approach. Thanks for watching.